I want to talk to you a few minutes about these challenging times and Wellspring. Now, of course, you all wound up doing Wellspring online on Zoom toward the end of this church year when your relationships are already formed and you already had a sense of one another, where you sat, what the chairs were like, what the table was like, how you came in, right? And that was fine, and you brought those feelings into the Zoom room, and it was a little different, but your relationships were already formed. But now we're heading into the fall with new groups starting. So how do you start well? Now, the good news is we've learned a lot in these last couple of years because we have been doing Wellspring online for religious professionals, and not just sources, but our advanced curricula as well. And so there are some tips and things I want to share with you today. Now, first, know that from the start, your experience of each other online is going to be different. But you're going to be starting the group, experiencing it online, right? This is about a mindset. This isn't a every time you come together, oh, I wish we were together again, because you don't know what it feels like to be in this configuration with these people in person. You are setting in this space, starting online, how it feels to be together. Now, I led a group this past year, and at some point at the end of March, beginning of April, we all remarked at how normal it felt to get together because we had always been online. And in these abnormal times, it was a grounding place of normalcy. So also know that because you're online, you can be a little more flexible about meeting times. This may be a real opportunity to reach out to people who couldn't normally join because of their work schedules or childcare issues or other issues of accessibility. And also know that it can feel a little bland, right? We all know that feeling of what they call the illusion of presence with Zoom, but you can make it feel more incarnational, more together. If everyone has some stuff every time, maybe the stones that they keep after the source's opening retreat, or maybe drawing or knitting supplies if they're doing sacred arts, or other things that people just have with them, candles for chalice lightings, all of those things help you have a sense of we all are sharing the same thing, even if we're all sharing them from different places. Now, do know that this does take a little more planning. And not just in what you present as a facilitator, although certainly that matters. It also matters to prepare people to bring what they need to their sessions. I think about that opening retreat where we invite people to pick up 2 stones and write on them for the closing ritual. And the first time I led this online, I totally forgot to have them bring stones to their computers. Oops. So I had them find pieces of paper and we did that, but it wasn't the same, right? So there are some things we need to think about beforehand. What are the supplies that we would normally lay out on a table and grab last minute in our spaces that we need to ask people to have with them, right? So it takes a little bit more planning and attention. It also takes a little more attention for active listening. It is so easy to be distracted by what's going on. The cat, something knocks off the table, the work that's also in front of you, the text messages, all of those things, right? And when we're together physically, we put our phones away, we sit in a circle, we have to face one another, and that's less of a thing, right? It's really easy to just hide our video on Zoom. So you need to decide from the start in your opening retreats whether it's okay for there to be distractions, that people aren't necessarily looking at the camera, maybe they're looking down, right? or talk about when it's important to look and be present. Perhaps during check-in, it's really important to not do anything, and then it's okay for some busy work during the discussions. So these are some different ways to think about the distraction. Also, with active listening, since you can't have a sense of who's going to go next, the mute-unmute feature is really wonderful. And often people will find that they will unmute and still hold silence for a few seconds before they speak to make that space so it's not just one person speaking after another. So use that. Use the visual cues you get from people. Okay? And I also want to talk about just a handful of tech tips. Now, I'm assuming you're using Zoom. If you're using other platforms, I'm sorry, this may not translate. But first, take advantage of breakout rooms. Certainly in your opening retreats, there are times when you break into triads or dyads or small groups, and that's really important, and you can decide who goes where, or you can send people off randomly. But also, think about using breakout rooms at times for reflections, for exercises. Also make use of screen sharing to share videos, play music, share words. Invite people, especially for those sessions where people need to show something. Make sure you allow screen sharing and let people share things. I think that helps a lot. I know that we often will allow screen sharing during check-ins to show a picture of something that happened because it's just a nice way to remind ourselves and each other of our spaces and the things that we can't necessarily show in person. I also recommend when working on your covenant and in the subsequent weeks when you are reviewing your covenant, use a Google Doc. Share that, let people see where the typing is, add their own things, share that document, and pull it up every time so that it becomes this living document that you're all sharing, right? Really, really helpful. Now, in the session plans, we've also added some help thanks to these years of doing these online. We've included tips for online facilitators, noting those things that just can't be done, like the closing sand mandala and sources. And, there are places where we have some suggested alternate tasks or alternate ways of doing, or skip this exercise because it requires us all to be physically together. Maybe some other ways that we can do some of these things. But we try to think about what's the experience and how do we still make it as rich as possible when we're virtually together. Now, ultimately, when you start online, you set up a particular way of being together. It's not better or worse than being physically in the same room. It's just different. So I invite you, as you begin to register and form your Wellspring groups for the coming year, invite the difference and enjoy the joys of being together in this kind of community. Blessed be.